Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Jon here. Jon, you're behind an incredible company that is offering, all these different passes for tourism, for travel, all around the world, and you've got millions of people that are getting these passes, and you've been able to really become the leader in this global travel, pass market. You've got a great, a lot of experience previously in the e-commerce space and just understanding how to build businesses online. You've been doing a great job with that for some time, so I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Look forward to talking to you.
Awesome. So, just going back to the beginning, like, how did your interest in business leadership and wanting to be involved in, in interesting companies and have, leadership role in them, how did that passion begin?
So, yeah, it's a great question, right? You sort of think back over your career and you think, what's a plan and what's accident? Certainly, getting into the e-commerce space was I think at the time a bit of a happy accident. So I was working for Asda, which is a retail chain in the UK owned by Walmart at the time, and we were just getting going with things like home delivery of food and non-food products. I was in the marketing team doing sort of data analytics and marketing at the time. So kind of some of the skills that would become useful, and I sort of got into it that way. I started to run Asda.com, the marketing side of Asda.com in the UK. And from there, I joined a sort of a pure e-commerce company, Shop Direct, running the business Very for them. And so that's kind of how I came into the field, if you like. I was there in the relatively early days. I wasn't a kind of total pioneer, but in the relatively early days of e-commerce retail, in with a couple of those businesses, and then when GoCity at the time came knocking in about 2016, 2017, they were looking for a leader that had some experience of building out e-commerce businesses, and so yeah, the conversation was great. I liked the sound of the product. I liked what the business was trying to do, and joined on that basis.
So, what made you interested in being involved in internet businesses and just e-commerce related stuff initially? Was there something that you really liked about that?
Well, I think I guess, the attractiveness of the sector. It's always interesting being in something that's new, right? So it was definitely the growth area of retail. There were a lot of new approaches and technologies being deployed. It was just quite an exciting thing to be involved in, and it was one of those things. It's maybe a little bit more mature now, but certainly over the last 10, 15 years, it's kind of been almost a new month. There's a new bit of kit that comes out, and you have to think about how to incorporate it into your decision making. So it was just from a sector point of view, it was exciting. There was innovation, there was kind of new ways of reaching customers, new ways of doing business. That was a really interesting thing to be involved in. Kind of for me personally, my university background, which is a long time ago now, but is maths. So I've always been kind of an analytical, kind of sort of numbers focused kind of guy, and so the the change in marketing from essentially a kind of creative industry that would kind of make big bets on TV advertising to a really how do you scale kind of data and analytics to optimize things kind of suited my natural skill set as well as it being a kind of innovative fertile territory at the time as well.
I mean, the space has evolved a lot since you've gotten into it.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, lots of technologies come, evolved, lots of technologies kind of had a go and then being passed by the wayside. And, some of the principles are the same, right? Though, so I did spend some time prior to the kind of explosion in e-commerce marketing working on kind of classical marketing. So I ran TV advertising and things like that for the Asda business for a while. So I had some exposure from some very inspiring leaders at that point in classical marketing techniques. And I think one of the things that leaders in e-commerce need to do is to combine both of those things. So you need to be willing to go into the detail on numbers and performance and analytics. But you also need to not lose sight of what you're here to do, which is to kind of bring great products to people. And so those principles about, how do you create great products? How do you get them in front of people? How do you kind of create some desire and awareness for your business is, it's that combination that kind of remains an interesting challenge.
So, how do you think that the opportunity to be at Go City even happened? Like, that they wanted you specifically. How did they reach out? How did that occur?
Yeah, so Go City's had an interesting history. So if I spend 1 minute talking about exactly what we do, we essentially pull attractions together and create a pass. So a classic example would be New York. So our New York pass, we've contracted 100 attractions, 105, I think, in New York City. And you buy a 3-day New York pass. And when you've bought that pass, you can go and visit as many attractions from that list as you want. As time allows, you can kind of, it gives you really the ultimate freedom to go and really experience the city. What in 2016, 2017, we're now private equity owned. And in 2016, 2017, our private equity owners essentially bought 3 businesses that were doing similar things around the world. 2 were US based, 1 was UK based, and combined them to create a global leader in the space. I knew a private equity business from a couple of prior things, and so they kind of reached out and said, would I be interested in coming on board? I'm sure they didn't just speak to me, but they spoke to a range of people, including me, about the opportunity and what you might do with it and how you might think about growth and the ability to expand that business. And, one thing led to another, and they made me an offer, and I was delighted to step on board.
That's awesome. So right when you did get on board, what did you think were the most immediate needs, and how did you make those types of changes necessary?
Yeah, great question. One part of the answer is because, as I say, we bought 3 different businesses and brought them together. So one part of the answer was classic kind of business integration, right? There were 3 different businesses. They all had their own ways of doing things. They all had strengths and weaknesses, and we had to kind of try and create one global operating platform, one way of kind of recording sales, and one way of thinking about how we monitor paid search advertising, all that kind of stuff. And so there was a kind of global integration role and making sure the teams worked harmoniously across borders and that kind of thing, which is, would be an interesting challenge in any industry, and was one of the things that we had to do. Then the other half of it was, once you'd done that and you'd got that kind of standard operating playbook, if you like, for what was to become the Go City business, it was then to think about, right, where are we? Like, what of all the ways we sort of build product and reach out to customers, what could we do better? What could we do in a slightly different way that would enable our product to work even better for customers? And how do we go about thinking about the growth potential of the business? And the answer to that was a few things. So firstly, I fundamentally believe every business, the first thing they care about should be the quality of the product experience you give to your customers, right? If that's good, other things fall into place. Your marketing will work, your reviews will be good, your customers will tell other people and will become advocates. And so we put in place robust tracking of what we call customer NPS. We didn't invent it. Obviously, a lot of businesses use it, but it was really important for us to create this common language of how well we're delivering that experience to customers. And then we really started to think about the team and the skill sets to try and drive that business and to create awareness of our products around the world. Our business is interesting. So in some ways, it's a lot less complicated than previous businesses I've worked in. So, Walmart, Asda in the UK have 50,000 products. The business I was running, the online retailer in the UK, 100,000 products. Very complicated, different product types, like everything from dresses to TVs to hairdryers, like a whole range of different non-food products. We are much, much simpler from a product point of view. So we don't have physical stock. So all of those kind of classic retail disciplines about how you manage a huge catalog and how you manage inventory, we don't really have those problems. The complexity we do have is we serve customers from literally anywhere in the world, right? So US is our biggest source market of customers, but we are in pretty much every country in the world. And so the complexity of currency and language and sort of designing marketing to appeal to customers everywhere around the world to buy products in destinations also all around the world, that is a really complex thing. And so we need to embrace different search platforms, different marketing technologies, with lots of work around content and translations. And so from that perspective, this is a pretty complex business.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just a lot of moving parts here you're dealing with all different vendors all around the world.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think one of the directions of travel is a slow move towards standardization. And that's a move towards standardization in terms of, marketing best practices, in terms of, the technology that attractions use to let people into their gates, in terms of, the connectivity between and the way different systems talk to each other. Those things are slowly standardizing, which is slowly making things a little easier for those of us essentially involved in the distribution of some of the great experiences that our attraction partners create. It's definitely been a slower pace in the tours and activities sector than it has in things like hotels and flights, right? Those areas of travel kind of standardized very quickly. I'm sure I'm undercalling the complexity in flights, but to some extent, a seat on a flight is a seat on a flight, and it'll have some characteristics. It will be a business class seat, or it'll be a window seat, or whatever. But there's a very standardized set of tools that enable distribution of that inventory around the world. That is much less true in attractions, partly because it's a slightly less, mature sector, and partly just because the range of different things is huge, right? You get some big businesses like, for example, the Empire State Building, and then we also work with a guy on a beach renting out surfboards. And so, they're never going to have the same technology, and they're never going to have the same needs and the same kind of desire to manage their inventory in the same way. And so it's one of the beauties and the frustrations of this sector that there is that variety.
It's quite a variety.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So you guys have really built this, now into, I think it's like the world's largest multi-attraction pass business. It's a very unique business. What would you say, Jon, have been some of the most important things that you guys have done to just scale this and to get, I think it's 60% today of the global, pass market? Is it just that your site's easy to use? Is it everything's so streamlined that you're just booking through you guys and you get all these different experiences? Is it the all access aspect of it? What do you think has really attracted people most to you guys?
I would, another great question. I think, so, we've got a team of 150 people with some partners, and we've been working at this for 7 or 8 years. So, the truth is there's loads and loads of things we've done. But if I was to try and categorize that, I think first thing is, as I say, make sure the customer proposition is excellent. So the core idea of being able to pay one price, go to a city and see as much as you want, let's deliver that really well. So a whole bunch of stuff under that in terms of making sure the app is really easy to use, the attraction information is really well kind of executed. If customers need to reserve their space at certain attractions, make that journey as easy as possible. So a whole bunch of stuff under once we get a customer and the customer is using the product, make it awesome. That's kind of bucket one. Bucket two is around the sales techniques. So making sure the sites are well merchandised. We're making sure that we can scale A/B testing. So we built a really strong in-house engineering team and a product team, and we've put a lot of time into making sure we can test kind of checkout optimizations or the way we talk about content on site. And one of the kind of mantras that I and the CTO have been driving is this at scale testing. So, it's not, again, we didn't invent that, but we've tried to apply those well understood principles to our business to really optimize the way we sell products. The final thing is making sure your back-end platforms can support whatever you want to do, and that data flows around the business really effectively. And so where we do a trial or a test or launch a new product, we can quickly see how customers are using it, how, what the barriers are. And so building this kind of much more flexible back-end system has been, if I'm honest, hard yards, but we're there. And we have a really flexible back-end system that now can kind of configure products in different ways and can kind of allow the level of innovation we need for the front-end sales process and the customer experience process.
So would you say you put more work almost into the back end, Jon, than the front of the site?
I think probably about the same. And it's always a balance, right? When you talk about a front-end feature, that's sexy and exciting. And you can kind of talk at an all-company conference and say, we've got this new feature landing, and people can get excited by it. When you talk about the back-end systems, it's like, I don't really understand what they do, or, it sounds like it's quite boring, and we can allow data to be processed in a slightly different way. But it's really important to enable that front-end innovation. And I think, so, if I think about the total amount of hours our engineers have spent, it's probably roughly 50-50. But if I think about where the energy in the business has been, it's more about the front end and the customer product improvement, because that's where some of the marketing teams and some of the customer service teams can see more of the benefit. I'll give you one example, and we've been quite fleet of foot about doing probably most of the work in-house with our own colleagues, our own engineers, but using third-party technology where it really adds value or it doesn't make sense for us to reinvent things. And one example is our GoBot. I don't know if you've played around with our app, but we've introduced essentially AI customer service capability that sits in the app through and we've packaged it under a name GoBot, which we like, which essentially gives kind of real-time FAQs and customer help to customers using the product in market. That's something that we've worked with a third-party company to deliver, because we're not going to invent kind of large language models ourselves, right? We're going to use those developments that have been done elsewhere, but use it in a way and tailor it for our business that helps create a really great customer experience when customers are using the product in market. And essentially what it's done is it's meant that instead of kind of a delayed, if customers have a problem, they're either on a phone line internationally or they're sending an email and waiting for a response, there's real-time service to about 80% of customer problems right there in the app.
So just about making, at this point, like a big focus is just making the experience more seamless, more optimized for the customer, less hassle.
Yeah, that's been. I mean, I really believe that. I try and be data driven. As I said, my background is quite mathematical, but I think as a fundamental point of principle, business leaders probably underplay that more than they overplay it. Like, if you make really good products that customers like, you'll generally be successful. And so it's kind of almost a point of principle for us internally that one of the first things we review every month is the P&L. If my private equity backers are looking at this, I hope they realize that we take great care in that. But the customer NPS, the way we deliver a great experience for customers, is really high up our list of things that we talk about in terms of the metrics we want to optimize. And we've made some great strides in that, delivered through technology, delivered through innovation, delivered through listening carefully to what they want. Things like recently we've introduced a trip planning product, which helps customers who are potentially undecided about what they want to do in a city think about, it gives them the opportunity to think about how they're going to spend their days. B, it gives them some suggestions of things, right? If you're going to go and see, I don't know what the example would be, but in London, if you're going to go and see the Greenwich Museum, nearby is the Cutty Sark, and here's a great way to combine seeing 2 or 3 different interesting things together and helping them sort of package that into kind of separating some really interesting days. The future for that is really interesting as well, because then we can start to add in maybe non-attraction product like restaurants or theatre tickets. And, we've got these customers, they're using our product, they're using our app while they're in market. And if we can help improve their experience in market by adding in other features, that's great for the customer and it's potentially good for our economics as well.
Have you thought about like integrating with some of these like travel booking services, more like the Expedias of the world, or even just with airlines directly, as like, this is a way for you to really fully plan your trip, because you're not really fully planning your trip. You're only booking the hotel sometimes, and with the flight, but the experiences are what you're going to do there.
Yeah. So we work, our business, around just about 2/3 of our sales are directly through our own website and 1/3 are through partners such as Expedia. So we already have kind of commercial relationships with those guys in terms of reselling our products. But there's definitely opportunity to kind of integrate more into some of the unique ways in which they access markets. And that's a really interesting example. I think it could be a really nice fit there. But even if it's not quite a fully integrated fit, I think our challenge, I don't know, before kind of preparing for this interview, how well aware you were of our business. But when I joined the business, I hadn't really heard of it. And it's a pretty big influential business. So one of our challenges is just getting in front of more people. And so we're encouraging our teams to be quite creative about, working with the likes of Expedia on kind of incorporating ourselves into a trip planning tool, or, for example, being on the Skyscanner flight website and working when customers search for New York on that site, how can we appear in front of them there? How we work with our other partners to just to occupy more shelf space essentially for customers wherever they are in the world who are thinking about visiting one of the great city destinations. And so, that marketing challenge is a really interesting challenge.
Definitely is, and there's a lot of opportunities in that segment. There's a lot of different sites to book flights and things like that. Um, just on a bit of a different topic, John, how do you see AI affecting this space? Is it just more of a convenience thing for customers that AI can bring? Like, what are some of the ways you're seeing?
Lots of ways. So I talked already about GoBot, right? So that's essentially using the power of large language models to scrape all of our kind of customer FAQs and our historic customer reviews to give customers kind of almost immediate advice on any given question or circumstance. That's one way. As I said at the start, we sell to a lot of different source markets. We've got some big source markets like the US and the UK and Germany, but we have a long tail. And so AI, particularly the LLM capability, can really help with translations. So, prior to the large language models, the kind of auto translate functions were okay, but weren't really intuitive from a language point of view for translation. It's getting better and better all the time. So our ability to kind of execute content more effectively in different language types is a big thing for us. But then there's, building on each customer who buys our New York pass will use it slightly differently and will have a slightly different itinerary. I don't know if it's literally the case that, there are, a million different itineraries a year, but it's something of that order. One of the really interesting things we're doing with AI is to scale and productize those obviously anonymized customer trips that customers have actually done. So we can say, customer X actually did this. And what that does is it gives people inspiration for how you can use the pass, but it also enables us to create kind of landing pages for customers like that. So like families did this kind of stuff. And then you can use AI both to kind of codify what families have done. And as I say, after each trip, we ask customers how much they liked the product and would they recommend it. And we can say that, the families who used the product and loved it, here's what they did. And that creates great landing pages for families. So using AI to help us scale that product out is also pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think just understanding what your customers do and then targeting new people with that is, I think that's a really smart idea. And you probably have a ton of data on all of that in general, just to
Yeah.
build things based on it.
And one thing we haven't quite figured out, so we know kind of probably just about in more detail than anyone else. Maybe Google Maps have this tracking. I don't know exactly what they do, but we know, if you're a traditional OTA, you would know your customers have booked a flight and a hotel, so you'd know they're going to New York City. Let's use that example again. You'd know they're going to New York City for 4 days, and they're flying in on this flight. They're staying at this hotel, but then you lose track of them. You don't really know what they've done apart from that. Because our customers are using our app to plan and to access the attractions, we know, not in a spooky Big Brother way, but we know the routes around the city. And so the ability for us to then kind of, and also we know a bit about them, right? We know which sorts of attractions they're choosing to visit. So, in London, we have a lot of football stadium tours. So if you come to London and are spending your time going to football stadium tours, you're probably a reasonably good prospect for selling a Premier League ticket to. If you're going to New York and you're looking at, some of the cultural attractions, you might be right in the market for a Broadway ticket. Or if you're doing an itinerary around the kind of south end of Manhattan, we know the perfect restaurant recommendation for you. So using that knowledge of where customers are and what they're doing, again, in a non-intrusive way, but in a helpful way to customers with pertinent recommendations about add-ons or other things they could do, that kind of stuff we have access to data that makes that possible, that we haven't fully cracked yet, and we're not fully monetizing yet, that actually it's quite hard for a lot of other businesses to do that.
So what do you want to do now? Like, what are some of your short-term goals, your long-term goals? Like, what do you think are the most important, your vision at this point and the most important things you want to accomplish?
Great question again. I've just literally this afternoon come out of an all-company conference where I was talking to the team about what we're going to try and do this year. So it's kind of fresh in my mind. I think the first thing is we spent a few years kind of really rebuilding our tech stack and making it very flexible. And so this year, one of our great opportunities is to build some different pass types, some different flavors of pass with different attraction inclusions and different rules that will enable us to target a broader range of customers. So we're great currently for that kind of trip of a lifetime customer. We have everything in New York, everything in London, nearly everything in Paris on one pass, and you can go and see whatever you want. What we're able to target some of those products to slightly more subtle, sophisticated segments of customers that might increase our reach. That's one thing. We've got some product innovation around the type of passes we offer. One of the benefits of that is we've got a kind of lighter weight product coming this year, which we are not unveiling the name of quite yet. But what that will do is we're currently in 28 cities around the world. And I think our core model would probably mean we can expand to about 40. But with this lighter weight product, we could possibly be in 200 cities. So it's a new product type, but it also opened up, by the fact of its existence, it opens up the cities we can kind of profitably and successfully be in. So there's quite a lot of expansion potential with that way. And then it's around how do we access other services. Like, as I say, we know quite a lot about our customers. We know how they're visiting the city. We know a bit about their interests. And how do we bring other products and services to their attention that are going to be tailored and targeted, that will be, and I'll reinforce this point, firstly, a customer benefit. It will make lives easier for our customers, but it also enables us to kind of expand what we sell and kind of broaden the reach of some of our products. So those are two of the big ways. Probably the other thing to mention is we are possibly have been a little behind on kind of using the social and influencer channel for marketing. Like we're okay, we're building scale in those two categories, but there have definitely been businesses in other sectors ahead of us. We've got some pretty interesting plans this year on working with influencers in different ways and working with organic social to broaden the reach of our business and try and create a bit more fame for what we're doing. So there's some pretty interesting kind of top of funnel marketing activity we're doing this year as well.
That's awesome. Well, Jon, that was all the questions that I had. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think, what you guys have built has been incredibly important to the travel space. I mean, I love, going on all these different unique experiences, and you have a pass that really makes that more possible for many people. And I'm sure there's tons of experiences that people never would have done without the passes that you guys have built. So I'm excited to see the new innovation you're going to continue to bring out, the social channels that you build, and just, how this is going to help more people. And so I appreciate you coming on and taking the time and doing this.
Yeah, great to talk to you, and thanks for having me.